Okay, so just to talk through a little bit about, I'm excited to be here today and share what we've been doing at our school. I'm currently at Ashwood Spencer Academy, and I moved from a special school where I worked. So it's really exciting to take on a new role and develop the SEN team in the new school, and making sure that we worked on that collaborative working to do that. So my current role, I'm Vice Principal and SENCO for leading on inclusion, engagement and wellbeing, and also an ED researcher here at Derby University, which has a focus on inclusion and collaboration, which I'll be talking about later on within this presentation. So really excited to share a little bit about what I've done with our team, and hopefully it'll showcase some ideas of how you can also develop your own setting further. And there's loads of really good practice what's going on, which has come out from the SEN peer review. So hopefully this will just add to some things what might be useful for you. Our context at Ashwood Spencer, we are an inner-city school, and a lot of pupils are socially disadvantaged, and pupil premium is above average. And we have an above average number on SEN pupils as well. So this is really just to share my journey and develop what we did development-wise to help support the whole culture and develop a culture and the SEN team across the school. So the workshop overview really is just going to identify the link between behaviour and SEND, and also how that our understanding of that is our starting point for supporting all pupils for inclusion. Demonstrate how collaboration developed a culture of inclusion within the school, and share how research circles can deepen collaboration, forming a professional learning community. So first of all, my starting point really when I came to the new school and was to look at what data was telling us. And I think, having that understanding and looking at what it was actually, how children were displaying and what that was telling us about pupils and inclusion was really important. So that was our starting point really, to take a deeper look and dig deeper to understand what our observations were telling us, and have them discussions with staff about what they felt was important. By having that and looking at behaviour, we had that understanding then that behaviour was a communication, and we could then start to unpick what that was telling us. So what was the reason behind the behaviours, and what was that displaying in regard to people's SEN needs? It's important that we understood and had that shared culture that behaviour was a communication, and it was important that we then had that way of developing it throughout the school, and what measures we put in place to support this. So we then went on to having a look at understanding the function of behaviour, and making sure that we were building them relationships with children. So making sure we had them incidental times when we'd drop in and have chats with the children, find out about them. And I think that's something as SENCOs that we do all the time. We dig deeper, and I know Jerry spoke about them pupil portraits, and understanding about how we can tap into the interests and what motivates pupils really helps with unpicking how we can then support them with behaviour and self-regulation. So using that kind of strategy, we then looked at proactive strategies and what were working. So identifying key staff who were really good at making them relationships with their pupils, and then getting them involved to develop and support others in helping support children with all needs and all different types of needs. So it was really important that we had that collaborative working from the start, and being able to implement the different strategies which we teach, and the teaching that skill we desired. So it's about making them adjustments again, and about having different scaffolds in place. But if we didn't teach the skill that we wanted, we would see that behaviour, whether it was related to a communication need and having the means and the function to be able to communicate effectively with others, or whether it was just in regard to a sensory need, and being able to self-regulate. So it was really important for us to be able to look at a whole and think about what kind of things we could do and put in place. So that meant we had to have that shared culture across our school, an understanding of the link that behaviour could possibly be a SEN need, but also pupils who had needs for inclusion, they might display different behaviours, which may be challenging to us. So it is our understanding and rethinking about teaching a behaviour, just like we teach the rest of the curriculum. So it's important we taught the behaviours that we wanted to observe in our pupils. So if we think about how that can be understood and put in place, it's about recognising really and identifying difference, and that's something that is important and something also to celebrate. So we all experience our lives from different perspectives. This means that what we can perceive as a truth to one of us, it can be seen totally differently and as a different perspective to someone else. So if we look at this cartoon picture here, for example, we've all got the same exam. They're all going to have to climb the tree. Now, to the examiner, that seems fair, because he's asking everybody to do the same thing. They're all on the ground, they're all at the same starting point, and they've all got to achieve the same goal, which is absolutely fine, yes. However, we can perceive how that will be different to the different types of animals, for example. So to the monkey, climbing the tree is natural for him, it's easy to do. Therefore, he will perceive the activity as fun and no presented behaviours. The bird, yes, they are able to climb to reach the top of the tree. However, how they get there, will that be perceived as cheating to somebody else? So it's really important when we think about how we implement scaffolds and support children, that we think about how that's carefully planned for children as well. So when we look at, you know, how the other characters here would feel, we start to get an understanding about what kind of scaffolds we might need to put in place, and why it's really important then that we have that same culture across our whole team of staff, but also within our school community, so that we're all on the same understanding that it's about supporting people with what adaptations they need to be able to make best use. So if we look at inclusive practice then, a definition that is sometimes useful just as a starting point. So there's just one to put on here with regard to how this leads us to consider our own inclusive practice really, and review our practice. Inclusive practice can be defined as attitudes and methods that ensure that all learners can access mainstream education. So it's really important that attitudes of our staff, our school community, our parents, our pupils, that everybody is on board and has the same ethos. It's important for us all to be working together, unpicking what kind of things are behind the behaviours that we're seeing within our classes, so that we can look at SEND and the provision as a whole and unpick what's working well and where we need to put our scaffolds in place. So everyone works to make sure all learners feel welcome and valued, and that they get the right support to help them develop their talents and achieve their goals. And this is about that lifelong learning that we want. We want everyone to go on and develop what they're truly able to go on and perceive. It's important that we understand about the real potential that each individual's got. And again, it's about when we get that right for our pupils with SEND, it also benefits all learners. And that then supports our inclusive practice. So if we're looking then really about behaviours and what that's telling us, it's really important that we have that understanding about how behaviour impacts on us and what kind of thing and how that's linked into SEND and our ways of communicating a need. So there's lots of different points around behaviour and how we display our behaviours. There can be internal conditions that occur within our body, and that might contribute to challenging behaviour. For example, if we've got sensory sensitivity, that can develop how we feel about, with regard to our 8 different senses, our tactile, auditory, visual and sight, but also our taste and our smell. That can have different impacts on our everyday way that we manage ourselves within the class. Our proprioception, knowing where our body is and what it's doing, that's really important for us to get that feedback. So a child who's lining up and keeps pushing in front of somebody or keeps touching the child next to them, maybe it's an internal condition what we've not quite worked out, and we need to think about what kind of other activities we can replace and scaffold that with. There's also about our vestibular processing, that child who also always looks upside down and is swinging on the tables and everything else and rocking on the chairs. Maybe it's because they've got vestibular processing. So what kind of scaffolds can we put in place for that child? There's also our internal GPS system, our interoception, and how that supports us in knowing about how our bodies work, about understanding the physiological conditions of your body, about knowing when you're hungry and how that's making you feel, and then how that might be displayed in a behaviour of some kind, about our heart rate, whether we feel that cortisol levels are going up or down in our bodies and making us feel anxious. It's about self-regulation then, isn't it, as well? We've also got our external conditions as well. So conditions or events occurring outside that the person increases the person and the chance of a behaviour occurring. That might be due to the noise of the room, the sensory overload with regard to wanting to escape, or it may be a film of failure that they can't engage in that lesson, that they haven't got the correct scaffolds. So maybe that might be one of the reasons with regard to that. We've also got that social attention as well. The child who displays behaviours such as shouting out, calling, grabbing and self-harming. By understanding all these different behaviours and having that shared vision across the school about understanding it as a communication, we can start to develop then more proactive strategies and putting them in place. We've also got things like our tangibles as well, when children want to gain an object, an activity, attention from the person. So what kind of things is that telling us about their SEN need, and also, again, linking to that behaviour. So it's really important that we get everybody on side when we're thinking about this and recognising the link that behaviour has with regard to communication, and it supports us about understanding differences and our early identification then of SEND as well. So to do this, it requires collaboration, it requires a greater creation of culture that supports inclusion. So just really to talk about our journey and share with you some of the things what we've implemented at our school. As a starting point, we had about the planning part of it. So again, like I said, looking at the school development plan, looking at behaviour within our context and SEN needs, and just having a good listening in, and using your eyes and ears just to find out what actually is happening within your school before we then develop what needs to be done. With regard to auditing and understanding, it was about understanding the culture and the context of our school, understanding about the pupils and what kind of weekends they may have had, what kind of support will need to be in place for a Monday morning, what kind of things could we support our families with, what were they struggling with at home, especially within our lockdown. So thinking about different scaffolds, what we could provide as a school, but also for our whole school community. This then focused on developing our behaviour policy and looking at day-to-day strategies, what we could implement and put in place. There was also other policies about inclusion and equality policies, were all fed into that, about developing that culture that we wanted to have within our school. And again, it was about, you know, launching what we wanted, providing that theoretical understanding to our staff, so that they could understand the reasons behind it, because having that knowledge of why we were doing something would make sure that staff actually bought into that as well. So it was really important that they had that as well. We then had the involvement of our staff with regard to thinking about the content design and what we wanted to set out. So about asking them about what they felt was important. So structuring staff meetings and insets around what would support them and what they needed to do as well. This is still feeding into our whole school development plan. We also had delivery and understanding, so how we responded to involving staff and developing them within their own practice. So making sure that they were really involved with how we delivered the staff meetings, but that they had a voice as well, and making sure we drew on their own experiences and their knowledge skill base as well, because a lot of staff have got a lot of knowledge which isn't always utilised effectively really within schools. So it's making sure that their knowledge was shared, but also about motivating further CPD and revisiting that as well. As we went on, we looked at also about that reflection, keeping up to date, reviewing what was working well, and then providing bespoke individualised CPD as we went along. And throughout this, we also had some coaching going on as well, which I'll explain to you in the next slide. So this was a focus for CPD for staff, and it was threaded through our school development plan as well. So this was used from Tom Sheridan, and it's in the reference list if anyone's interested in that. It's something that we introduced to all staff, and they were involved in it with an instrumental coaching model, which provided like the graphics, and it helped support staff, giving them strategies to focus on. So staff worked with a buddy, and all staff were involved, both teachers and TAs, and they were buddied up with different partners according to what they wanted to focus on, but also because of different experiences, what different people had to offer. They also had a lot on one of the sections on this, which I led on. SLT were all linked to it. So we had ones for curriculum, ones for assessment, behaviour. So they had different approaches, which you would have a SLT lead, which they could then feed into as well. So by having this, it supported our quality first teaching model really, and our universal offer. It considered about what was happening in their own classroom, and they could decide an area that they wanted to work on to develop, and that would support them with different strategies to put in place. It might be to do with scaffolding, it may be to do with behaviours and developing routines consistently, but it's a real way of getting that thread of SEND threaded throughout our whole school community. There was a chance for them to trial and practice systems, and because the book focused on that instrumental coaching model, the focus was on the book and not about looking at what was going well or not in the lesson, but actually going back to the models, what were being used. And I think staff found that really useful as well. There's also a development, an opportunity to collaborate with others, review their practice with their partner, but also you had a lot of teacher talk and that professional learning community of others discussing what would work well and have you tried this strategy. And that was really a good way of developing that culture and keeping them, you know, what they were up to kind of thing in that knowledge base. Within the staff room, within the corridors, it was all chatter about what was working well and what they wanted to develop next. And that reflection had a greater collaboration across the team as they developed a plan, discussions around what would then happen and what the impact had been as well. Within that, we also had different say staff meetings going on with regard to inclusive practice as well. So we led on what was going well and thinking about inclusion as a whole, looking back over time and thinking historically what had inclusion looked like or what wasn't inclusion, thinking about language, what was used in the past and what kind of things we could then implement. So our staff came up with their own inclusive practice of what was working really well. And I think this really links into how staff are feeling, what was supportive of them and what worked. But it also helped us to identify what else we could be doing really, and what more we could add. One part of you know, working with across a large school team, and you know, when you're working on collaboration and wanting to get them everyone involved, it's really important to identify those people who can sparkle and are really committed and enthusiastic about supporting inclusion. So by identifying those key people who could drive inclusion across our school, we could then help them to roll it out as well. So getting them all on board, and then it suddenly starts to spread across our whole school community about sharing that great practice, their knowledge and attitudes. So a lot of staff had, we had a lot of knowledge and had done different kinds of training which would support pupils with SEND. But also we had a lot of staff who had great attitude to supporting children with SEND, that great relationship. And by working together in collaboration, we could improve our practice, you know, about how we implemented that and what kind of culture we wanted to create for our children and our families. So it was important to not make assumptions as well, you know, to be the ears and eyes on the ground as well, to have a look about what was happening, and also to support people, not to assume that they knew exactly how to support individuals, but also to ask them as well, is there something what I can help with, what kind of things, you know, or getting somebody else to do that, because it's very hard sometimes to come up and discuss what's difficult. So it is important for staff to have the correct induction, and it's important to have that kind of coaching model where you could adopt it. That was the practice within the school, and it was about learning together. This is our approach really to inclusion and what kind of things we then came up with regard to supporting and our wider view of SEND. So my role sits in the middle. You know, I'm there to support and liaise with the principal, the governors, the trust, other members of SLT. We all filled in our safeguarding team and attendant officers. This all supports our inclusion, and it's underpinned obviously by legislation and also by the code of practice. But on top of that, we have got a wide range and diverse range of specialists support systems in place, and I just wanted it to be shared really with staff about how SEND is everybody's business and what their different roles are at different points. So just to be clear about what my role was, is about coordinating the provision. Yes, I'd liaise with parents and children, the SEND and other providers. However, they are at the forefront of working with children. They know the children best, as the parents do. So it's really important that we had everybody within our school team involved in supporting SEND, and then wider, obviously, with our working with our families and the wider community as well. So we have our assistant SENCO who leads on communication and interaction, and she liaises with a lot of the speech and language professionals. We have communication practitioners as well who underpin with more specialised support. We've also got different provisions which support children in total communication environments. And we've got our learning and behaviour mentors who also provide different types of interventions to support children's social and emotional mental health, but also our communication practitioners in regard to supporting children's speech and language as well. But our teachers, they're implementing at all levels. Our TAs, our, even our play workers, they're working with SEND alongside the pupils. So it is really important that we had this understanding about everybody's role, everybody working together to support all children, and making it clear that, who else we could provide to support them on their journey. So one of the things what we looked at was working in collaboration, was about building our SEN team. So identify the expertise already in the school, what skills and knowledge can we tap into, understand our current offer and what it was, and how do we know if our inclusion was working. So we use the Jamboards to get everyone involved about what expertise was going on with the school, thinking wider from just like the SEN team, what they knew, but knowing about different staff who had different skills and knowledge. And that was really key to developing what we had to offer. We also had what kind of support would be in place, which is different from pupils who are receiving without SEND or receiving. So what kind of inclusion did we want to put in place? And this is what staff were coming up with, what was happening, to show off our good practice. And then it was about, how did they know if the support was working? What kind of things could they talk about, and that inclusive culture? So it was developing, again, that link between behaviour and SEND, but also that they were developing children's communication. You can see there, they're thinking about self-regulation and working with parents. The child voice is supported, and that was real progress. So looking back at collaboration then, the impact, what that has been, it's improved our relationships with our staff team by having that professional learning community. It supported staff, pupils and parents as well to be involved and making sure feel that they're being listened to as well. It's also improved our proactive practice for making sure we get them strategies right in place for children, and making sure that SEND is visibly evident within our provision, that we've got all them sensory equipment in place where they need it, and individual timetables, the language levels are correct as well. There's also that deeper understanding of the graduated response. We did 3 sessions just based on graduated response and how that would look, and the use of EduKey, which we use as a provision mapping. And all staff now know how to implement this and how to review it. So that's working a lot better now. And because everyone's mind is on the forefront and inclusion is their focus, it really does support our parents and our carers as well with implementing that. That collaborative practice has really developed our inclusive practice and promoted the culture and ethos of our school. So this also links into my own research and using research circles as a collaborative tool. So I'm currently conducting my ED at Derby Uni, and the way that we've done this is that staff were involved in this, and also parents as well as part of the research circle. So the research circles were used to develop an intervention, and the research was quantitated study, and it measured sign accuracy levels of 10 pre-selected signs at 3 points of the intervention to measure any impact. But it also used research circles to develop the intervention and discuss the practitioners' and parents' views, and they were documented as well within the research. So a research circle then, it's got a theoretical starting point in action research and participant-orientated research. But the aim is that we create a beneficial meeting between theory and practice. So we discuss what's happening and theoretical practice relating to the intervention, but also look at pedagogy of how that's being delivered within this research. So we use this and we use professional learning community. So that was a collaborative tool. It's inclusive and it improves outcomes as well. So it was about the culture of the school and influence on all levels, because it had like almost like a Russian doll effect. We had the gatekeepers with regard to our governors and everything involved about what was happening. We had our teachers and practitioners involved, but then we also had our parents involved in being part of that research circle. So it's a real professional learning community. The research circles were both with regard to inclusive, because we made sure that everybody was involved, and we use the use of Teams platform to support collaboration with that. We took what worked well with our online learning and made that into supporting the use of research circles, where parents and practitioners working together, discussing learning, what was going on within the intervention and developing it further. Stages of the research circle then. So we had stage one, where practitioners only came in. They would discuss the rate intervention, which was going on. And the reason for this was to do with safeguarding, really, and the use of photos and video clips were used. So that's the only reason why parents weren't involved with that, because of having a wider group of children. Stage two did involve practitioners and parents, and it was about observations and discussions of children's engagement within the intervention. And stage three was about the practitioners and parents, and this was where they looked at what was happening, the motivation behind it, and how they could further develop an intervention. The benefits of this, there was a real focus on improvement, which really supported that. There was a depth of discussion around how the intervention was impacting upon their own child, their communication and their physical skills. There was real collaboration between practitioners and also parents, and there was further CPD, it highlighted about further development and ways of supporting our SEN team to understand more theoretical understanding of sensory processing, of communication, and how that linked with them wanting to be involved. So again, it was about that additional talk and focus. So final thoughts then, just really maybe with yourselves, just identify where improvements can be made. A good starting point again is, be the eyes and ears on the ground and have a think about what's happening, what your data is telling you, and consider what that can provide. Think wider than your SENCO. Who else in the school is that knowledge, and who could disseminate different experiences and inspire other practitioners. So think wider links to outside schools or agencies as well. Consider building that professional learning community, how we can learn together and share a goal, and keep reflecting and developing. We're still on a journey, we've still got more to do, and I'd love to know what other people are doing to develop that as well. So thank you for listening. References are on there, and if anyone wants to contact me, That's my email if you're interested in anything. So thank you.